The cargo bay of the Velcara station smelled like rust and stale air that had been recycled too many times. Commander Vector stood near the containment zone, his 4 arms crossed over his chest as he stared down at what he considered nothing more than a problem that needed solving. Chained to the reinforced metal floor was a massive wolf. Her silver-gray fur was matted with dried blood and dirt from days of confinement. 3 small cubs huddled against her side, their tiny bodies trembling as they let out soft whimpers. The mother wolf had eyes that didn't match. One was bright amber like fire, the other ice blue like a frozen lake. Those eyes tracked every single movement in the bay with an intelligence that made some of the guards uncomfortable. Officer Rena walked up beside Vector, her scaled skin reflecting the harsh overhead lights. Her voice came through the translator chip with barely hidden disgust. "So this is the predator that killed Captain Morlax?" Vector nodded slowly. "Happened during a routine cargo inspection on Colony Theta 7. Morlax tried to separate her from those cubs. She went wild. Tore through 3 of our security guards like they were made of paper. Took 6 neural dampeners to finally bring her down." The wolf's lips pulled back from her teeth. They were designed for one thing and one thing only: killing. A low rumble started deep in her chest, and the 3 cubs pressed even closer to their mother's belly, sensing the danger in the air. Rena looked at the cubs with cold eyes. "Terminate all of them. Standard protocol for dangerous specimens. We cannot risk trying to transport them anywhere, and no facility in 7 systems will accept a human-bonded predator without its original handler present." "The human is already dead," Vector confirmed, his voice flat and matter-of-fact. "Some foolish colonist who actually thought he could domesticate a Terran apex predator. Apparently the wolf killed him too." That was a lie, but it was so much easier than explaining the complicated truth. The real story was that the human had died while protecting his wolf from a group of illegal poachers. But those details didn't matter to the Galactic Enforcement Division. Their rules were simple. A dead human meant an unclaimed animal. An unclaimed animal that had killed someone meant immediate termination. No exceptions. No second chances. Vector pulled his plasma pistol from its holster. The weapon hummed to life, a soft blue glow emanating from its core. "I'll make it quick and clean. We start with the cubs first. Once they're gone, the mother will be easier to handle. She won't fight as hard." The wolf understood. Maybe she couldn't speak their language or understand their words, but she understood danger. She understood what it meant when someone pointed a weapon at her babies. Something primal cut through the barriers of species and language. She threw her entire weight against the chains that bound her. The reinforced titanium groaned and creaked under the strain. Fresh blood began dripping from her legs where the metal restraints cut deeper into her flesh. Then she howled. It was a sound that seemed to come from the very depths of her soul. Pure anguish. Pure desperation. A mother's cry for her children. The sound echoed off the metal walls of the cargo bay, making even Rena take an involuntary step backward. "Do it now," Rena ordered, her voice sharp, "before she manages to break free from those chains." Vector raised the plasma pistol. His finger began to tighten on the trigger. The weapon's targeting system locked onto the smallest cub, the one with a white patch of fur on his chest. 2 more seconds and it would all be over. "Stop. Stop right now." The voice came out of nowhere, cutting through the tension like a blade. Every head in the cargo bay turned toward the entrance. A human woman was striding toward them, her work boots making sharp metallic sounds against the deck plating with each step. She was young, probably in her late 20s. Dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Her maintenance jumpsuit was covered in grease stains and had seen better days. The ID badge clipped to her chest read, "Beth Mitchell, Station Mechanic." "This is official Galactic Enforcement Division business, human," Vector said, his tone cold enough to freeze water. "You need to return to your assigned duties immediately." But Beth didn't slow down. She didn't hesitate. She walked straight past the armed guards like they weren't even there. She walked past Vector himself, past his raised weapon, and dropped to her knees directly in front of the wolf. The mother's growl intensified, vibrating through the air. But Beth stayed perfectly still. Her hands were visible, open and empty. No weapons. No threats. "You cannot terminate her," Beth said quietly, her eyes never leaving the wolf's mismatched gaze. "There is a Terran protection clause in the Galactic Species Preservation Act. Any Earth-origin species found in distress automatically falls under human jurisdiction. You have no authority here." Rena's scales rippled with frustration. "That clause only applies to endangered species, human. Wolves were removed from Earth's endangered list over 2 centuries ago when their population numbers stabilized. Check your database again, Beth said, her voice steady and calm. Timber wolves with heterochromatic eyes. That's a specific genetic marker found only in the northern Canadian subspecies. They are still listed as protected. And this isn't just any random wolf. Look at her collar. Vector moved closer, though he kept his weapon raised and ready. Beneath all the blood and grime and dirt, there was indeed a collar around the wolf's neck. It was faded and worn, but embedded in the material was a small registration chip. Beth pulled out her personal scanner from her tool belt. She waved it slowly over the collar. The chip activated, flickering to life and projecting a small holographic display into the air. Stella Certified Emotional Support Animal registered to David Mitchell, Colony Theta, 7. The name hit Beth harder than any physical blow could have. But she kept her voice from shaking. David Mitchell was my brother. That makes Stella and her cubs my legal responsibility under Terran law. You cannot terminate them without my consent. Renish translator actually crackled with the force of her anger. Your brother is dead, human. The official report states that the animal killed him. No, Beth said, and now there was steel in her voice. My brother died protecting her from illegal poachers. I have the complete station logs. I have witness statements from 3 different colonists. Stella did not kill David. She tried to save him. She fought the poachers while David was bleeding out. She stayed by his side until he died. Vector's weapon lowered slightly, just a fraction. Even if that version of events is true, this animal still killed Captain Morlax. That is a capital offense under galactic law. She acted in self-defense. Beth shot back immediately. Morlax violated every protocol in the book when he tried to forcibly separate a mother from her infant cubs. Any human court would rule that as justified defense of family. Your own laws recognize the right of any sentient being to protect their offspring from harm. The wolf, Stella, had stopped growling. Those strange mismatched eyes were fixed on Beth with an intensity that seemed to look straight through her. Not recognizing Beth as an individual but recognizing something deeper. The scent perhaps. The voice patterns. The genetic markers that humans shared. Something that screamed family. One of the cubs, the smallest one with the white patch on his chest, let out a soft whine. Beth's hand moved slowly, carefully, telegraphing every movement. Her fingers gently touched the cub's soft fur. Stella's entire body went rigid with tension, but she didn't attack. She didn't even snap. She just watched. I am taking them, Beth said, and her voice left no room for argument. All 4 of them. I will sign whatever release forms you need. I will take complete and total responsibility for their actions. But I am not leaving here without my brother's wolf and her cubs. Vector studied her for a long moment. You are a station mechanic. According to our records, you live in a 200-square-foot apartment in the lower residential section. You can barely afford to feed yourself on your current salary. How exactly do you plan to care for 4 full-grown Terran apex predators? Beth stood up, and when she met Vector's eyes, hers were blazing with determination. The exact same way my brother did. With love. With patience. And with the understanding that these are not just animals. They are family. And family takes care of family. Rena pulled Vector aside. They spoke in low tones, but Beth could still hear fragments of their conversation. Legal complications. The Terran embassy getting involved. Paperwork. Delays. Resources wasted on what they considered a minor issue. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Vector holstered his plasma pistol. Fine. They are your problem now, human. But understand this clearly. If that animal harms even one single resident of this station, both you and the wolf will be tried for murder under galactic law. There will be no trial. No appeals. Immediate execution. Do you understand? I understand perfectly, Beth said. The guards moved forward and began removing Stella's chains. The heavy restraints fell away one by one, clanging against the metal floor. The moment the last chain was removed, Stella lunged forward. Several guards reached for their weapons, fingers on triggers. But Stella wasn't attacking anyone. She pressed her massive head against Beth's chest, her whole body shaking. It might have been relief. It might have been grief. Probably it was both mixed together. Beth wrapped both arms around Stella's neck. She buried her face in the wolf's bloody, dirty fur and whispered so only the wolf could hear. I've got you now. David would have wanted me to protect you. I promise I've got you. The 3 cubs seemed to understand that something had changed. They tumbled over each other in their desperate rush to reach Beth. Tiny paws scrambled at her legs. She sank down to the floor and let them climb all over her, their baby teeth nibbling gently at her fingers in play. Vector watched the scene with barely concealed disgust written all over his alien features. Humans, he muttered to Rena as they walked away. Always so eager to save the monsters. They never learn. Beth looked up at his retreating back, one hand resting on Stella's scarred head. Maybe that is because we understand them better than you ever could. As the GED officers left the cargo bay, Beth remained sitting on the cold metal deck with her new family surrounding her. She had absolutely no idea how she was going to keep the promise she had just made. She had no money saved up. She had no space in her tiny apartment. She had no plan whatsoever. But as Stella's 3 cubs curled up against her legs and the mother wolf's breathing finally began to steady and slow, Beth knew one thing for absolute certain. She would figure it out somehow. Because that is what humans did. They protected their own no matter what the cost. Beth's apartment was never designed to house 4 wolves. The Station Housing Authority had made that crystal clear when she filed her emergency residence modification request. But after spending 3 full days sleeping on the cold metal floor of the cargo bay with Stella and her cubs, Beth had finally managed to wear down the bureaucrats with a relentless combination of Terran legal codes and pure stubbornness. Now, at exactly 0600 station time, Beth sat cross-legged on her tiny apartment floor while 3 wolf cubs treated her like their personal climbing structure. The smallest one, who she had named Patch because of the white marking on his chest, was currently attempting to chew through her boot laces with his tiny needle-sharp teeth. The middle cub was a female with a coat so dark it was almost black. Beth had named her Shadow, and right now Shadow was engaged in an intense game of tug-of-war with Beth's only blanket. The largest cub was a male with eyes the exact same ice blue as his mother. Beth called him Blaze, and at this particular moment he was trying his absolute best to howl. The sound that came out was somewhere between a squeaky toy and a broken air filtration system. Stella watched everything from her position near the door. Her head rested on her massive paws, but her eyes never stopped tracking every single movement in the room. 3 days of proper care and regular feeding had started to restore some of her strength. The deep wounds from the chains were finally beginning to heal over, and Beth had managed to get her to eat real food instead of the awful synthetic protein paste the GED had been feeding her. But Stella still had not truly relaxed. Not really. She watched Beth with a complicated mixture of trust and wariness, as if she was waiting for the inevitable moment when this human would fail her just like the universe had failed her before. Beth's communicator suddenly buzzed against her wrist. She glanced down at the message and let out a long groan. Great. Just absolutely great. The text message was from her direct supervisor, Mr. Hendricks. Report to Chief Engineer Voss's office immediately. Bring all documentation regarding your animals. Beth carefully extracted herself from the pile of puppies and looked at Stella. I have to go deal with station politics for a while. Will you be okay here with the cubs? Stella's ears twitched slightly, but she did not move from her spot. Beth had spent most of her savings installing motion sensors throughout the apartment and had added triple locks to the door. The cubs would be safe enough for an hour or two. 45 minutes later, Beth found herself standing at attention in Chief Engineer Voss's office while the large Centaurian glared at her from across his massive desk. His face was difficult to read, but his body language screamed displeasure. Explain to me, Voss said slowly, each word carefully measured, why my absolute best mechanic is now apparently running an unauthorized wildlife sanctuary inside crew quarters? They are not wildlife, sir, Beth said, keeping her voice respectful but firm. They are registered emotional support animals. I have all the proper paperwork filed with the Terran Embassy. Emotional support animals, Voss repeated, his tone dripping with skepticism. These are the same support animals that nearly killed 3 trained security officers and a GED captain just a few days ago. Stella was defending her cubs from someone attempting to forcibly remove them, Beth said, placing a data pad carefully on Voss's desk. I have compiled every single incident report from that day. Captain Morlax violated multiple Terran protection protocols. He had absolutely no legal authority to separate Stella from her cubs. What happened was self-defense, pure and simple. Voss picked up the data pad and scrolled through the reports, his alien features remaining completely unreadable. Legal authority or not, you are creating a massive liability issue for this station. We have over 40,000 permanent residents representing 73 different species living here. A significant number of them view Terran predators like your wolves as extremely dangerous threats. Some species have cultural or biological reasons to fear predators. You are making a lot of people very uncomfortable. Then those people are welcome to file a formal complaint through the proper legal channels, Beth said. But Stella and her cubs are not going anywhere. Beth. Voss's voice softened just slightly. I knew your brother. David was a genuinely good man. One of the best colonists Theta 7 ever had. But taking on his wolf is not going to bring him back from the dead. The word struck harder than Beth had expected. She looked away quickly, blinking back the sudden sting of tears. I know that, sir. I know nothing I do will bring David back. But Stella was everything he had out there on that colony. She was his partner, his friend, his family. And now she is all I have left of my brother. I cannot just abandon her. Voss released a long sigh that sounded like steam escaping from a pressure valve. The station council is holding a meeting in exactly 3 days. They are going to vote on whether to allow Stella and her cubs to remain on Velcara Station. You will need to present your case to them directly. What case? Beth asked, feeling frustration rising in her chest. She is my family. That should be enough. On Earth maybe that would be enough, Voss said. But this is Velcara Station. Different rules apply here. Different species, different laws, different expectations. He pulled up another document on his screen. However, there might be a way to significantly strengthen your position. The medical wing has been submitting requests for months asking for approval to start a therapy animal program. Trauma patients, especially those still recovering from the recent Krell attacks, have shown remarkable improvement when allowed to interact with animals. Beth's mind immediately started racing through the possibilities. You are saying that if I can prove Stella and her cubs provide legitimate medical services, then the council would have to approve them staying? I am saying it would make your case considerably stronger, Voss said, leaning back in his chair. But I need you to understand something clearly. This path is extremely risky. You would be putting Stella in direct contact with vulnerable patients, many of whom come from species that have evolved to instinctively fear predators. If anything goes wrong, if Stella shows even the smallest hint of aggression toward anyone, you will both be immediately expelled from this station. No appeals. No second chances. Stella will not hurt anyone, Beth said with far more confidence than she actually felt inside. She is gentle. David spent 5 years training her specifically for emotional support work. Then prove it to me, Voss said, handing her a small contact card. Dr. Palmer runs our psychiatric ward. Convince her that Stella can help her patients, and you will have the entire medical wing's support at the council meeting. Beth left the office clutching the contact card in her hand, feeling a tight knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. She had just committed herself to something that could either save her family or destroy absolutely everything. When she returned to her apartment, she found Stella sitting in exactly the same position she had left her in. But the cubs had somehow managed to completely rearrange Beth's furniture into what appeared to be some kind of fort constructed entirely from pillows and thoroughly shredded upholstery. We need to have a serious talk, Beth said, kneeling down until she was at eye level with Stella. I think I might have found a way to keep us all together. But it means you are going to have to trust me. Really, truly trust me to guide you through this. Stella's tail thumped once against the floor. It was not much of a response, but it was something. Over the next 2 days, Beth worked double shifts at her regular job to afford the supplies she needed. She bought reinforced bedding designed for large animals. She purchased specialized high-protein food formulated for Terran canines. She acquired professional training equipment. She studied every single file she could locate about David's training methods with Stella. And she practiced the same basic commands and socialization exercises over and over again until her voice went hoarse. Stella was incredibly patient but clearly confused by the whole process. She had already been fully trained. She knew perfectly well how to heal, how to stay calm around strangers, how to provide comfort to someone experiencing distress. But doing all those familiar things without David, without her original handler present, seemed to cause her genuine emotional pain. Beth could see it clearly in the way Stella's ears drooped whenever Beth used the same hand signals that David had taught her. I know I am not him, Beth whispered late on the second night, sitting on the floor with Stella's massive head resting in her lap. I know I will never be able to replace David. Nobody could ever replace him. But we can honor his memory by continuing the work he started. By showing everyone what he already knew in his heart. That you are not a monster. You are a healer. Stella's eyes slowly closed, and for the very first time since Beth had taken custody of her, the wolf seemed to truly rest. On the morning of the 3rd day, Beth received a direct message from Dr. Palmer. Bring Stella to Medical Wing C, Room 7. I have a patient who specifically requested animal therapy. This is your audition. Do not waste it. Beth's hands were shaking badly as she attached Stella's official service vest. It was a simple harness that clearly identified her as a working animal, not a pet. The 3 cubs would have to stay behind, secured safely in the apartment with extra food and several enrichment toys to keep them busy. As Beth and Stella walked together through the station's main corridors, other residents gave them an extremely wide berth. Some people stopped to stare with obvious curiosity. Others looked at them with undisguised fear. One Krell merchant actually hissed loudly at them as they passed, his translator spitting out something aggressive about predators and death. Stella pressed closer to Beth's leg but kept walking forward. Her head stayed high and her steps remained measured and professional. She was working now. Medical Wing C smelled exactly like every hospital Beth had ever visited. Antiseptic chemicals and recycled air. Dr. Palmer met them right at the entrance. She was human, probably in her 50s, with kind eyes and gray hair. The patient in room 7 is named Kit, Dr. Palmer explained as they walked. 8 years old according to their species development. Survivor of the Krell attack on transport ship Meridian. Severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Has not spoken a single word in 3 weeks. Will not eat. Does not respond to any traditional therapy methods we have tried. The parents are absolutely desperate. What exactly happened on the Meridian? Beth asked quietly. The Krell boarded the ship and slaughtered everyone they could find. Kit survived only by hiding inside a ventilation shaft for over 6 hours while listening to their entire family die. Dr. Palmer's voice remained clinical and professional, but Beth could hear the deep emotion underneath. Kit has not left their hospital room in 3 full weeks. Every single attempt we make to move them triggers violent panic attacks. Beth looked down at Stella. Can she really help with something like that? That is exactly what we are here to find out, Dr. Palmer said, and she opened the door to room 7. The room was small and kept dimly lit. Curled into a tight ball in the corner of the medical bed was the smallest alien child Beth had ever seen in her life. Kit's skin was a very pale purple color, almost translucent. Their large eyes were squeezed tightly shut. Stella stopped right at the threshold. Her nostrils flared as she took in the overwhelming scent of fear and trauma that filled the room. Then, without any command or signal from Beth, the wolf walked slowly and carefully into the room. She did not approach Kit directly. Instead, she lay down on the floor approximately 6 feet away, deliberately making herself appear as non-threatening as physically possible. Beth held her breath. This was the critical moment. Either Stella's years of training would hold firm, or everything would fall apart right here. For 5 long minutes, absolutely nothing happened. Then Kit's eyes opened just slightly. The child stared at Stella with a confusing mixture of pure terror and intense fascination. Stella yawned deliberately. It was a calming signal, a way of showing she was relaxed and safe. Then she rolled onto her side, fully exposing her vulnerable belly in a gesture of complete submission and trust. Kit sat up very slowly on the bed. "Big dog," the child whispered, the words barely registering on the translator. "Her name is Stella," Beth said as gently as she possibly could. "She is very friendly. Would you like to meet her?" Kit did not answer with words. But the child slowly slid off the medical bed and took one tiny trembling step towards Stella. Then another small step. Stella remained perfectly motionless except for her steady, calm breathing. When Kit finally got close enough to touch, the child reached out with one small, shaking hand and carefully placed it on Stella's soft fur. Stella's tail wagged just once, very slowly and gently. That single tail wag seemed to break something deep inside Kit. The child collapsed against Stella's side, small hands clutching desperately at the wolf's fur, and began to cry. Not the terrified screams of nightmares, but deep, healing sobs that had been trapped inside for far too long. Stella shifted her position slightly, curling her large body protectively around the tiny alien child, providing warmth and safety and the silent promise that nothing in the universe would hurt them while she was there keeping watch. Dr. Palmer stood frozen in the doorway, and Beth could see tears glistening in her eyes. "How long has she been trained for this kind of work?" 5 years, Beth said, her own voice thick with emotion. "My brother worked with veterans, with refugees, with anyone who needed help processing trauma. Stella was his partner in all of it. They stayed in that room for over an hour. By the time they finally left, Kit had eaten a complete meal for the first time in weeks, had spoken dozens of words, and was sleeping peacefully with one small hand still buried deep in Stella's fur. "You have my complete support," Dr. Palmer said as they walked back toward the entrance. "I will testify at the council meeting on your behalf. But Beth, you need to understand something important. This was an absolute best-case scenario. Not every patient will respond the way Kit just did. Some might react with violence. Some might be too afraid to even be in the same room. Can Stella handle that kind of rejection?" Beth looked down at the wolf, who gazed back up at her with those strange mismatched eyes. She has been handling exactly that her entire life. Humans are not the only ones who understand what trauma feels like. As they left the medical wing and headed back home, Beth felt the enormous weight of what she had just committed herself to. 3 days until the council meeting. 3 days to prove that a creature most species considered a deadly predator could actually be a healer. 3 days to save her family. But for the first time since David had died, Beth felt something that actually resembled hope growing in her chest. The council chamber of Velcara Station was specifically designed to intimidate anyone who stood before it. The circular walls rose 3 full stories high, covered entirely in screens that displayed constant data feeds from every corner of the massive station. The council members themselves sat on an elevated platform that forced anyone presenting a case to literally look up at them. 7 representatives from 7 completely different species, and right now each one of them was looking down at Beth with expressions that ranged from mild skepticism to outright hostility. Beth stood in the exact center of the chamber with Stella sitting calmly at her side. The wolf wore her official service vest and sat at perfect attention, but Beth could feel the tension radiating through her body. Stella absolutely hated being watched by this many strangers all at once. Council Chair Mordak leaned forward in his seat. He was a massive Draxian with scales that seemed to shimmer and shift colors like oil on water. "We have thoroughly reviewed your petition, Miss Mitchell. You are requesting permission to keep 4 Terran predators on this station despite numerous and significant safety concerns raised by residents. You have exactly 5 minutes to present your case. I suggest you use that time wisely." 5 minutes. 5 measly minutes to save everything that mattered in her entire world. Beth took a deep breath and forced herself to speak clearly. Stella is not just a predator. She is a fully certified emotional support animal with 5 complete years of professional training. My brother, David Mitchell, worked extensively with trauma survivors on Colony Theta 7. Stella personally helped dozens of people recover from post-traumatic stress disorder, severe depression, and crippling anxiety. She literally saved lives. "Your brother is dead," Officer Rena interrupted coldly. She was the same GED officer who had wanted to execute Stella in the cargo bay. Killed by the very colonist he tried so hard to help. And this animal violently attacked our security forces. "My brother died protecting Stella from illegal poachers," Beth said, fighting to keep her voice steady and firm. "And Stella only attacked in clear self-defense when Captain Morlax tried to forcibly separate her from her infant cubs. The law is absolutely clear on that point." "The law is certainly one thing," said Council Member Zira. She was a crystalline being whose voice sounded like breaking glass being translated through speakers. "But this is fundamentally a practical matter that we must address. We have over 40,000 permanent residents from 73 different species living on this station. A very large number of them view Terran predators as extremely dangerous threats. Your animal's mere presence creates fear and instability throughout multiple sectors." Beth had expected exactly this argument. She pulled out her personal data pad and projected a hologram into the center of the chamber for everyone to see. 3 days ago, Stella worked with a patient in the psychiatric ward. A young child named Kit who had not spoken a single word or eaten any food in 3 full weeks following a traumatic event. Within just 1 hour of meeting Stella, Kit ate a complete meal and began talking again. Dr. Palmer has provided a comprehensive medical report documenting everything. The hologram displayed detailed medical charts and Dr. Palmer's full written testimony. Several of the council members leaned forward in their seats to examine the data more closely. "One isolated success story does not prove overall safety," Rena argued sharply. "What happens when this animal encounters someone who she perceives as threatening her cubs? What happens when her predator instincts completely override whatever training she has received? Then you will have the exact same problem you would have with any parent in the universe protecting their child." Beth shot back immediately. "Stella's strongest instincts are to protect those she loves. That is precisely what makes her so valuable for therapy work. She understands fear on a fundamental level because she has experienced it herself. She understands trauma because she has survived it. And she knows how to help others heal because my brother spent years teaching her that compassion is infinitely stronger than violence." Compassion. Rena's translator practically dripped with sarcasm. "This is an animal we are discussing. It does not understand abstract concepts like compassion. It understands food and territory and basic survival instincts. Nothing more." Stella's ears flicked backward at the harsh tone, but she remained perfectly still in her sitting position. Beth placed one hand gently on the wolf's head, a grounding gesture for both of them. If that is truly what you believe, then you fundamentally do not understand Earth predators at all, Beth said quietly. Wolves are pack animals by their very nature. They form deep emotional bonds with their family members. They grieve their dead just like we do. They protect the vulnerable members of their pack. Stella has done more genuine good for the people of this station in just 3 days than some so-called intelligent beings managed to do in their entire lifetimes. Council member Thex had been watching silently this whole time. He was a quiet Minoran who rarely spoke during council sessions. But now he cleared his throat. You make a very emotional argument, Miss Mitchell. But this council requires practical solutions to practical problems. How exactly do you propose to manage 4 rapidly growing wolves in a 200-square-foot apartment? How will you afford their care on a station mechanic's salary? And most importantly, how can you possibly guarantee the safety of our 40,000 residents? This was the critical question Beth had been preparing for since the moment she received the council summons. She pulled up another document on her data pad. I have formally applied for expanded living quarters in Section D7. That area is currently being used as unused storage space. With some basic modifications, it can easily be converted into proper living accommodations and a professional training facility. As for the cost of care, Dr. Palmer has officially offered to fund all of Stella's expenses through the medical wing's therapy program budget. And regarding safety concerns, I am proposing a 6-month trial period. Stella and I will work exclusively in the medical wing under constant supervision. Any incident, any problem whatsoever, and I will immediately accept removal from the station. 6 months is an extremely long time for something to go catastrophically wrong, Zira chimed in. 6 months is also long enough to definitively prove that something can go remarkably right, Beth countered. You have 40,000 people living on this station. How many of them are currently struggling with unresolved trauma from the war? How many refugees have nightmares every single night? How many children like Kit are trapped inside their own fear with no way out? Stella can help them. She can make a real difference in their lives. But only if you are willing to give her an actual chance. Mordak raised one clawed hand for immediate silence. We will now hear testimony from Dr. Palmer of the medical wing. The doctor entered the chamber, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet. Honored council members, I have spent over 30 years of my life treating trauma patients using every therapy method known to modern medicine. I have tried everything. But in one single hour, Stella accomplished what months of traditional treatment could not. Kit is now eating regularly, speaking with family members and engaging with the world again. That child is healing because of what this wolf provided. One patient, Renner repeated stubbornly. A statistical sample size of exactly 1. Then allow me to provide significantly more data, Dr. Palmer said calmly. She projected her own hologram showing dozens upon dozens of case files. I currently have 47 patients on my official waiting list who have specifically requested to meet Stella. Word has spread organically throughout the entire station. People are actively asking for her help. Are you seriously going to deny them that opportunity simply because of unfounded fear? The council members began murmuring among themselves. Beth could not hear exactly what they were saying, but she could clearly see the division among them. Some were nodding thoughtfully. Others were shaking their heads firmly. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of waiting, Mordak spoke directly to Beth. Miss Mitchell, please remove your animal from the chamber while we deliberate on this matter. Beth's heart immediately sank like a stone, but she nodded professionally. She and Stella left the chamber and waited in the corridor outside. Through the translucent doors, she could see the silhouettes of council members arguing, their shadows gesturing sharply at each other. We did our absolute best, Beth whispered to Stella, running her fingers through the wolf's fur. Whatever happens in there, we tried everything we could. Stella pressed her warm body against Beth's leg, offering comfort even in her own moment of terrible uncertainty. 15 agonizing minutes crawled by before the doors finally opened again. Mordak's expression was completely unreadable as he gestured for them to return inside. The council has reached a final decision, he announced in his deep voice. By a vote of 4-3, we will allow Stella and her cubs to remain on Velcara Station under the following mandatory conditions. First, you will receive the expanded quarters in Section D7 as you requested. Second, Stella will work exclusively in the medical wing for a probationary period of 6 months. Third, any incident whatsoever involving aggression or injury will result in immediate termination of this arrangement with no appeals. Fourth, the 3 cubs must be trained to the exact same professional standards as their mother before they reach full maturity. And fifth, You will submit to monthly performance evaluations by this council. Do you accept these terms in full? Beth's knees nearly buckled with overwhelming relief. Yes. Yes, I accept all of it. Thank you so much. Do not thank us yet, Rena said coldly from her seat. You have been given a chance and nothing more. A temporary opportunity to prove your claims. Use it wisely, human. As Beth left the chamber with Stella walking beside her, she passed Chief Engineer Voss standing in the corridor. The large Centaurian nodded with obvious approval. I told him you were worth taking the risk on. Please do not make me look like a liar. I will not let you down, sir, Beth promised with absolute conviction. I swear it. That night, back in her tiny apartment with 3 wolf cubs sleeping in a giant pile and Stella resting peacefully by the door, Beth finally allowed herself to cry. Tears of pure relief. Tears of grief for David. Tears of gratitude for this impossible second chance they had been given. Stella lifted her head and made a soft whuffing sound. Beth crawled across the floor and buried her face completely in the wolf's thick fur. We are going to do this, she whispered into Stella's neck. We are going to show them all what you can really do. What David always knew you were capable of. Stella's tail thumped solidly against the floor. Tomorrow morning the real work would begin. Tomorrow they would start proving themselves. But tonight, right now in this moment, they were safe. They were together. They were home. And that was enough. 3 months after that council meeting, Section D7 had been completely transformed into something Beth had only dreamed about. The converted storage area was absolutely massive compared to her old cramped apartment, with enough open space for the cubs to actually run and play like young wolves should. But it had also been cold, industrial, and smelled strongly of hydraulic fluid when she first got the keys. It took Beth 3 solid weeks of working double shifts at her regular mechanic job to transform the space into something actually livable. She installed proper climate control systems so the temperature stayed comfortable. She set up specialized bedding designed for large animals. She brought in professional training equipment. She even managed to create a small garden section with real earth grass, imported at absolutely enormous expense, where the cubs could play and dig to their heart's content. Storm, Scout, and Blaze were growing at an incredible rate. At 6 months old, they were already showing completely distinct personalities that made each one unique. Storm was bold and aggressive, always the very first to investigate anything new or unfamiliar. Scout was cautious but deeply curious, watching everything with intense focus before making any moves. And Blaze, despite being the largest of the 3, was remarkably gentle. He was always careful not to accidentally hurt his siblings during their rough play sessions. Stella watched her cubs with a powerful mixture of pride and fierce protectiveness. But she also watched Beth constantly, as if she still was not entirely certain whether this human would actually keep all the promises she had made. Beth's communicator suddenly buzzed with a new message from Dr. Palmer. New patient in room 12. This is a challenging case. Come whenever you are ready. Stella was already standing at the door with her service vest held carefully in her mouth. She knew the routine by heart now. 3 patients every single day, 2 hours per session, always under direct supervision. In 6 weeks of work they had treated 19 different patients. 18 had been remarkable successes, and 1 had been an uncomfortable situation when a Krell veteran panicked badly at the sight of Stella's teeth. That single incident had resulted in Beth's first monthly evaluation, where she had barely managed to convince the council that the Krell's reaction was completely understandable given their species' evolutionary history with predators. She had promised better screening procedures. The council had decided to let it slide this one time, but Beth knew she was walking an incredibly thin tightrope. Room 12 turned out to hold a middle-aged human man named Vincent Cole. According to his medical chart, he was a former cargo pilot. He was suffering from severe depression following the tragic loss of his entire ship and crew in a catastrophic navigation system failure. Vincent sat motionless on the edge of his hospital bed, staring blankly at the wall. He did not even look up when Beth and Stella entered the room together. Mr. Cole, my name is Beth. This is Stella. Dr. Palmer thought you might benefit from some animal therapy sessions. No response whatsoever. Vincent just continued staring at that wall as if Beth did not exist at all. Beth had learned over the past weeks that sometimes words were not the answer to reaching someone. She quietly guided Stella to a comfortable spot near Vincent's bed and sat down on the floor herself. Stella settled beside her, resting her massive head on Beth's lap. They sat together in complete silence for 10 full minutes. Then 20 minutes passed. Beth did not push or try to force any conversation. She just existed in the same physical space, offering the simple possibility of human connection without demanding anything in return. Finally, Vincent spoke in a voice that sounded like it had not been used in days. They all died. Every single person on my crew. 23 people. And I lived only because I went to check on a stupid sensor malfunction in the cargo bay. 30 seconds. That is all that separated me from them. Survivor's guilt, Beth said softly. Stella understands that feeling better than most. Vincent looked at her for the very first time. His eyes were hollow and empty. A wolf understands guilt? Her handler was my brother. He died protecting her from poachers. She could not save him no matter how hard she tried. She has been carrying that weight ever since. Vincent's eyes slowly shifted to Stella. The wolf raised her head slightly, meeting his gaze with her strange mismatched eyes that seemed to look straight into his soul. Come here, Vincent said very quietly. Stella stood up and walked over to him without hesitation. She gently placed her head on his knee, a simple gesture of comfort that required no words. Vincent's hand moved slowly, almost reluctantly, until his fingers finally touched Stella's soft fur. I cannot sleep anymore, he whispered. Every single time I close my eyes I hear them screaming. I see the hull breach tearing through the ship. I see all their faces. Stella has nightmares too, Beth said gently. Sometimes she wakes up in the middle of the night howling. When that happens, the cubs immediately comfort her. They pile on top of her and refuse to let her be alone with her fear. Vincent's fingers tightened their grip in Stella's thick fur. I am completely alone now. My family does not understand what I am going through. They keep telling me I should be grateful to be alive. But all I feel inside is empty. Just empty. Stella shifted her position slightly, resting more of her substantial weight against Vincent's leg. The pressure was calming and grounding. A physical reminder that he still existed in real space, that he was not just floating endlessly in the void. They stayed exactly like that for the remaining hour of the session. Vincent talked when he needed to talk. He cried when the tears finally came. And sometimes he just sat in heavy silence with his hand buried deep in Stella's fur. When the session finally ended, he looked absolutely exhausted but somehow lighter at the same time. Can I see her again tomorrow? He asked. Every single day if you want, Beth promised without hesitation. Over the next 3 months, Vincent became one of their most regular patients. Beth watched him gradually come back to life in small but meaningful ways. He started eating better and actually enjoying his food. He began sleeping through the night without constant nightmares. He even started laughing occasionally at small jokes. Dr. Palmer carefully documented absolutely everything, building a comprehensive case file that showed undeniable improvement in patient after patient. But it was not just Vincent who was healing. There was Calera, a warrior who had lost both legs in combat and found new purpose through helping train the wolf cubs. There was young Ryan, a human child with autism who barely spoke to anyone but could spend peaceful hours just brushing Stella's fur while explaining his complex thoughts to her. There was elderly Mrs. Grant, a dying woman suffering from terminal illness who found genuine peace in Stella's calm presence during her final days. Each success strengthened Beth's position with the council significantly. Each recovered patient became a passionate advocate for the therapy program. But Beth knew deep down that she absolutely could not afford to get complacent. One major mistake, one serious incident, and everything would collapse instantly. The cubs were growing faster than Beth had ever expected. At 6 months old, they were nearly half of Stella's impressive size and absolutely full of adolescent energy that seemed endless. Training them properly was an exhausting daily challenge. Storm wanted to chase absolutely everything that moved. Scout kept trying to dig through the reinforced floor panels. And Blaze, despite his naturally gentle nature, kept accidentally breaking things with his rapidly increasing strength. Beth spent every single spare moment working intensively with them, teaching the exact same commands and behaviors that Stella had completely mastered. Dr. Palmer sometimes helped out, bringing patients who could benefit from puppy therapy while simultaneously helping Beth socialize the young wolves properly. It was during one of these normal training sessions that Beth received an urgent message from Voss. Council emergency meeting in 1 hour. Your attendance is mandatory. Beth's blood immediately ran cold. Emergency meetings were never good news. She quickly secured the cubs in their area, grabbed Stella, and raced to the council chamber as fast as she could. When she arrived, she found the chamber absolutely packed with station residents. The viewing galleries were completely full, and the mood in the room felt dangerously tense. Mordak called the meeting to immediate order. We have received formal complaints, he announced in his deep voice. Multiple complaints, actually. Residents from Section C claim that wolf howling is severely disrupting their sleep cycles. Others report feeling genuinely unsafe sharing corridors with these animals. And most seriously, there was an incident yesterday involving one of your wolves and a station security officer. Miss Mitchell, would you care to explain exactly what happened? Beth's mind raced frantically. What incident? She had been with Stella all day yesterday monitoring therapy sessions. Unless it was one of the cubs. The cubs, she said suddenly with dawning realization. It was one of the cubs, was not it? Rena activated a video feed on the main screen. The footage clearly showed Storm, Stella's daughter, in a corridor. A security officer approached her, reaching for his handheld scanner to check her identification chip. Storm, still young and impulsive and excited, had jumped up in enthusiastic greeting, accidentally knocking the officer backward onto the floor. The video made it look aggressive and dangerous. But Beth had seen Storm greet friendly people hundreds of times. The cub was playful and excited, not violent or malicious. That officer was startled but completely unharmed, Rena said. But this incident raises serious questions about your ability to properly control these animals as they grow larger and stronger. Beth looked up at the packed galleries. Most faces showed clear fear or anger. But scattered among the crowd were familiar faces she recognized. Vincent, Kit, Calera, Ryan, and dozens of other patients Stella had personally helped. The cub made a mistake, Beth admitted honestly. She is only 6 months old and still learning appropriate behavior. I take full responsibility. It will not happen again. How can you possibly guarantee that? Zira demanded. You cannot physically watch all 4 wolves every single moment of every single day. Then I will hire professional help, Beth said desperately. I will implement much stricter protocols. I will install additional security measures. Whatever it takes to make this work. Mordak raised his hand for silence. This council will now hear from those who wish to speak on this matter. We will hear from opponents first, then from supporters. A merchant stepped forward angrily. These predators have absolutely no place on a civilized station. My customers refuse to shop in my district because they are terrified of encountering the wolves. I have lost 40% of my business. One by one, opponents presented their legitimate cases. Each complaint was valid in its own way. The wolves were disruptive. They were frightening. They were a liability. Beth felt her hope crumbling with each angry testimony. Then Vincent Cole stood up. I would like to speak, he said quietly. Vincent walked to the center of the chamber. 6 months ago I tried to kill myself. I had lost everything. Dr. Palmer tried every medication available. Nothing worked at all. I was planning exactly how I would end my life when Beth brought Stella to my room. He paused, gathering himself. That wolf saved my life. She just sat with me. She let me feel something other than emptiness. Because of Stella, I am standing here today instead of floating dead in space. Vincent looked directly at the council. Yes, the wolves make noise. Yes, they are big and scary. But they are also healers. Maybe the inconvenience is worth saving lives. Calera stood next. I lost my legs in battle. I lost my pride and my reason to live. The cubs gave me purpose again. One by one, patients stood and shared their stories of healing and hope. Dr. Palmer spoke last. In 9 months, Stella has worked with 73 patients. 68 have shown significant improvement. These are real people with real lives. Finally, Mordak spoke. Miss Mitchell, the therapy program will continue. Stella and the cubs may remain. However, you must hire a certified animal handler, the cubs must pass behavioral tests, you must implement soundproofing, and establish a community outreach program. I accept everything, Beth said immediately. That night, Beth sat with Stella and the cubs. We did it. Against all odds, we actually did it. And tomorrow they would continue healing those who needed it most. 18 months after that critical council meeting, Beth stood in front of a massive crowd gathered in the station's main plaza. Behind her, a brand new building gleamed brilliantly under the artificial lights. The Mitchell Center for Animal-Assisted Therapy, named in honor of her brother David. Stella sat at Beth's side, now wearing a formal service vest decorated with multiple commendations from the medical wing. Storm, Scout, and Blaze sat in a perfectly straight row beside their mother, all 3 wearing their own official service vests. At 1 year old, the cubs had passed their behavioral certifications with absolutely perfect scores. Well, Scout and Blaze had passed with perfect scores on their first attempt. Storm had required 3 separate attempts and considerable bribery with treats before she finally managed to control her enthusiastic impulses. The crowd was incredibly diverse. Humans, various alien species, all gathered together to celebrate the opening of this facility. Many were former patients whose lives had been changed. Others were simply curious residents who wanted to see what all the attention was about. Council Chair Mordak stepped up to the podium, his massive frame somehow looking less intimidating than it had during those tense council chamber sessions. 18 months ago this council took a significant risk, he said, his deep voice carrying across the plaza. We allowed 4 Terran predators to remain on this station despite substantial opposition from many sectors. Today, I can say without any reservation whatsoever that it was absolutely the right decision. He gestured to a massive holographic display showing detailed statistics. The Mitchell Center has successfully treated 412 patients with an 89% success rate. Depression rates among trauma patients have dropped 52%. Suicide attempts have decreased 67%. And perhaps most remarkably, we have seen a 31% reduction in interspecies conflicts as residents learn to challenge their assumptions about what truly makes someone dangerous. The crowd erupted in enthusiastic applause. Beth felt tears building behind her eyes but forced them back. This was not her personal moment. This was David's legacy finally being recognized and honored by everyone. Miss Mitchell, Mordak continued, would you like to say a few words to everyone gathered here? Beth stepped nervously to the podium, her hands gripping the sides to keep them from shaking visibly. My brother David believed with his whole heart that compassion was humanity's greatest strength. He believed that the ability to see past our immediate fears, to genuinely connect with those who are different from us, was what made humans special. He proved that belief every single day through his work with Stella. She looked down at the wolf, who gazed back with those unforgettable mismatched eyes. When I first took custody of Stella and her cubs, I was absolutely terrified. I had no money saved. I had no concrete plan. I had no idea if I could actually do this. But I learned something incredibly important. You do not have to have all the answers figured out ahead of time. You just have to care enough to try. Beth gestured to the diverse crowd. Every single person here who supported this program, who gave us a real chance despite their fears, who chose hope over certainty, you made this possible. This center is not just about wolves helping people heal. It is about all of us helping each other become better. The applause was absolutely deafening. Beth stepped back and Dr. Palmer took her place at the podium. I would like to introduce everyone to the center's new staff, the doctor announced proudly. In addition to Beth and our 4 amazing wolves, we now have 3 certified animal handlers, 2 veterinary specialists and 5 full-time therapy coordinators. We have also partnered with Earth's Wildlife Preservation Program to bring in additional therapy animals over the next year. The crowd murmured with obvious interest. Beth had fought for months to secure adequate funding for this expansion. It turned out that success naturally attracted generous donors. Several wealthy merchants whose family members had been helped by Stella had contributed significant amounts of credits. The Terran Embassy had provided a substantial grant. Even some of the initial opponents had quietly donated after witnessing the results firsthand. After the official ceremony ended, Beth gave personal tours of the new facility to interested groups. The building had everything her cramped quarters had lacked. Proper training areas with professional equipment. Comfortable therapy rooms designed for multiple species. Outdoor spaces with real grass and actual trees. And separate living quarters for the wolves that finally had proper soundproofing installed. Vincent Cole, now working as one of the therapy coordinators, showed a large group of visitors the main therapy room. This is where most of our daily sessions happen, he explained enthusiastically. We have designed it to be comfortable for multiple species, with fully adjustable temperature, lighting and even gravity settings. Calera led another group to the training area, where she was teaching a popular class on wolf behavior to station residents. Many people fear the wolves simply because they do not understand them, she said to the attentive students. When you learn to properly read their body language to recognize their communication signals, the fear just disappears naturally. Young Ryan, now 8 years old and significantly more verbal than before, was in the puppy area with a brand new litter. Stella had given birth to 5 more cubs 3 months ago, and they were already showing incredible promise as future therapy animals. This one's name is Echo, Ryan explained enthusiastically to a group of fascinated children. She is really good at knowing when people are sad. Watch this. Ryan deliberately made himself look dejected, slouching his shoulders dramatically and looking down at the floor. Immediately, the tiny cub waddled over on unsteady legs and pressed against his leg, making soft whining sounds of concern. When Ryan suddenly smiled, Echo's tail wagged so furiously her whole back end wiggled. See? Ryan said proudly. She's gonna be just as good as Stella someday. maybe even better. As the long day finally wound down and the crowd slowly departed, Beth found herself completely alone in the center's peaceful garden area. Stella and the 3 older cubs joined her, and they sat together watching the artificial sunset that the station systems generated every evening. "We actually did it, Stella," Beth whispered. "We built something real and lasting." Stella's tail thumped solidly against the ground. Storm was sprawled in a completely undignified heap, snoring loudly. Scout was methodically grooming Blaze, who tolerated the attention with his usual patient resignation. Beth's communicator suddenly buzzed. A message from Dr. Palmer. "New patient request just came in. Refugee from the outer colonies. Severe trauma case. Asking specifically for Stella by name. Can you take the case?" Beth smiled. "Of course I can. When do they need us?" "Tomorrow morning. I will send the complete files." Tomorrow there would be another person desperately needing help. Another soul carrying weight they could not bear alone. Another precious chance for Stella to do what she did best. Simply being present, offering comfort without any judgment, showing that real healing was actually possible. Beth thought about her brother David, about the night he had died protecting Stella from those poachers. He had given his life to save her. And in doing so, he had set in motion a chain of events that had ultimately saved hundreds of other lives. "I hope you can see this, David," Beth said quietly to the artificial sky above. "I hope you know what you started. What Stella and I are carrying forward in your name." A gentle breeze from the climate control system rustled through the real grass. Somewhere in the station, a patient was sleeping peacefully for the first time in months, their hand resting on a photograph of a wolf with mismatched eyes. Somewhere else, a family was having dinner together and actually laughing again because animal therapy had given them back their child. And in countless rooms across Velcara Station, people were healing because one human had absolutely refused to give up on 4 wolves that everyone else wanted destroyed. Storm suddenly woke up and immediately tried to start a wrestling match with Scout. Within seconds, all 3 cubs were tumbling across the grass in a chaotic ball of fur and flailing paws. Stella watched them with what could only be described as pure maternal exasperation. Beth laughed, the sound carrying across the peaceful garden. "Come on, you troublemakers. Let's go home." They walked back through the center together, past the therapy rooms where tomorrow they would help more people, past the training areas where they would prepare the next generation of service animals, past the memorial plaques on the wall that read in bold letters, "In memory of David Mitchell, who taught us that compassion is not weakness, and that those society fears most often have the most to give." As Beth locked up the center for the night, she paused to look at her reflection in the glass door. She saw a tired woman in a worn mechanic's jumpsuit, surrounded by wolves that most of the galaxy still considered monsters. But she also saw something much more. A healer. A teacher. A guardian of her brother's most important dream. She saw someone who had taken an impossible situation and transformed it into genuine hope. Stella pressed her warm body against Beth's leg, solid and real and constant. "Ready to do it all again tomorrow?" Beth asked. Stella's tail wagged once, and in that simple gesture was everything Beth needed to know. They would continue. They would heal. They would prove over and over that the greatest strength was not in claws or teeth or violence. It was in the quiet courage to care when caring seemed completely impossible. It was in the stubborn refusal to abandon those who needed help. It was in understanding that sometimes the scariest-looking creatures have the absolute gentlest hearts. As they walked back to their quarters, Beth could hear the sounds of the station around them. Life continuing. People healing. Hope spreading like ripples across water. And at the center of it all, 4 wolves and 1 human, proving that family is not defined by species or origin. It is defined by who stands beside you when everything falls apart. By who refuses to give up on you when the world has already moved on. By who sees you not as you appear but as you truly are. Stella had lost David. But she had found her purpose. And together with Beth, she would spend the rest of her life showing the entire galaxy that the greatest gifts often come in the most unexpected packages.